You've decided to get a second dog, and in this video, I'm not going to discourage you from that idea. However, I am going to give you some things to consider before bringing a second dog home. First, to make sure that you are comfortable and you know what to expect out of bringing a second dog into the house, but secondly, to make sure that the dog already in your home is comfortable as well. Let's get into it. What's up guys, it's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health. I'm a professional dog trainer, and on this channel we focus primarily on dogs facing anxiety disorders and how to recover a dog's mental health. In my signature program, the Recovering Rover program, I work with dogs facing exclusively anxiety disorders. A lot of times people think that they should be getting a second dog to help their first dog's anxiety. So if that's you, I actually have a video that I think is a little bit better for you. I recommend that you open that in a new tab and watch that video instead. However, if you're still with me and you're interested in bringing in a second dog into the home, even though your first dog does not have any anxiety disorders, then one of the common themes between that video and this one is that I want you to consider the dog already at home. Yes, we want to make sure that the two dogs get along, but I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into some things to consider. The first thing to consider is how well does your dog at home get along with other dogs? Dogs plural. Because if they've been able to build a relationship with one other dog, that really isn't enough data, that isn't enough proof that they're going to get along with a second, third, and fourth dog. Perfect example just happened actually with my family. My cousin they lost one of their dogs. The dog passed away. And so they decided to bring in a second dog. And when that happened, the older dog that had been there for a while did not take to the puppy too kindly. And it wasn't just because puppy was a puppy. It was actually because this dog had a really solid relationship with the dog that passed, but had never really formed solid relationships with any other dog before. So this was almost the exception to the rule. And this isn't really enough data to indicate that your dog at home is going to have a good relationship with the second dog, or the third dog in this case, that you bring into the house. One of the things I want you to consider is, has your dog been able to form pretty reasonable relationships with many dogs? That would be anywhere from like 2 to 10 different dogs. Have they been able to really associate and understand and build a communication between themselves and those other dogs? Now, a lot of times we get a second dog to sort of exercise the first dog, right? Or to exercise both of the dogs. And this absolutely is a benefit to having 2 or more dogs, is that if they have similar play strategies, they can really exercise one another. But here's how I want you to shift your mindset around this. Instead of thinking that the dogs are exercising each other, I really want you to think that they are enriching one another. So this is more enrichment based as opposed to just like how many miles are they running a day. Different breeds are going to have different play strategies. Different individuals are going to have different needs when they're playing. And so it's important that you're looking through an enrichment lens, which is to say you're thinking about meeting the dog's holistic needs. You're thinking about meeting the dog's need to hunt, their need to stalk, their need to dig, their need to go into walls and find mice. Like, that's the lens you actually want to be thinking through. So if you have 2 breeds that are really contrasting one another, let's say you have like a Jack Russell Terrier and a Mastiff, it's not that they can't get along, they absolutely could get along, but their needs are pretty vastly different, which means that they're not actually going to be exercising each other as much as you think. Their needs are different, and so what needs are not being met by one another, they're gonna seek out in other avenues. Sure, you might be getting that social component, they might be building a relationship with one another, they definitely could like each other, and that's for sure meeting a need. But don't expect your Jack Russell to be as tired after playing with a Mastiff. Their needs are just completely different. So thinking about the dogs and their play strategies and how they match is a very important thing to consider when you're thinking about what new breed to bring into the family. Sometimes we think to ourselves, well, I'm bringing in another dog to enrich my family, to make us happy and to run with, right? My older dog at home, I can't really run with her because she's a Bichon Frise, right? And so I want to go get a dog that's running. That totally makes sense. But if you have a 15-year-old Bichon Frise, it doesn't make sense to go adopt a 6-month-old Border Collie unless you are ready to basically take on most of that dog's enrichment. If you are thinking that the two are gonna like exercise one another, you probably wanna reconsider that a little bit. So sometimes bringing in a second dog is actually just more work for you, not necessarily like they're helping one another and it's just, you know, it's a little extra work, but what big difference is it? It really depends on what breed you're bringing in, how well they complement each other. If you're bringing in a dog that complements the dog that's already at home, then yeah, maybe it's not a ton of work extra. But if you're bringing in two dogs that are contrasting each other a whole lot, you effectively have brought in two single individuals who you both have to enrich. That doesn't mean, again, that they aren't liking each other. It doesn't mean that they have to get in fights all the time. It's just that their needs are not being met by each other, and so that's where you have to step in. And I think a lot of times around this conversation, you'll hear things like, oh, you're taking on more work. We have like the sort of this idea that taking on that extra load is basically, you know, buying an extra bag of dog food every month and putting the dog through his 3 basic skills classes to teach him his obedience. And that's the work that we think we're taking on. Maybe we're thinking we're adding in an extra walk every day. And so our brains tell us that this is something that's very doable. But you're also taking on that dog's mental health, for better or worse. That's how you actually have to think about it, because the dog that you bring in may have behavioral issues and you didn't realize. They may have an anxiety disorder. They may become reactive when people go close to their food. They may be excessively excited when they're on walks, right? And so that's a mental health concern. That's not an obedience concern. There's two very different things. So instead of just thinking like, oh, the extra workload that I'm taking on is a couple extra training classes, I also want you to consider, well, what happens if that dog has separation anxiety? Do I have the means, do I have the capability to meet that dog's needs if they have separation anxiety? Because that's an anxiety disorder, right? What if they have generalized anxiety and they can't actually go outside my front door? Do I have the ability energetically, financially, from a time perspective to meet that dog's needs? These are all things that I think get overlooked because we don't think about our dogs having anxiety disorders. We don't think about dogs having a mental health concern. We just think of them as happy-go-lucky dogs that everyone is going to do well with. But that's not always the case. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to make sure that you go in committed regardless of what dog you get out. Regardless of if your dog has an anxiety disorder, are you going to be equally committed to that dog, whether he has an anxiety disorder or not? The last little thinking writing prompt that I have for you is I actually want you to think about what you are not willing to do for this new dog. A lot of times people will say things like, I'll do anything for my dog. And often that's coming from a very, very, very good place, but it's still hyperbolic. Often there is a line. Like there is something that you are not willing to sacrifice for your dog. Find out what that is and really consider. I want you to sit with it, maybe journal about it, and really think about what are you willing to not give up for this new dog. And when you're deciding whether or not you need to bring a new dog in the house or even what dog to bring into the home, make sure that the individual you're bringing in is not likely to go against what you're not willing to sacrifice. Now, for your second dog, if you're considering bringing in a rescue specifically, then that is going to be my very next video. And if you're watching this well in the future, it's clicked right here. You can watch that now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video, and I'll see you guys next week.